Go ahead and have a seat if you would. It's interesting. I just as I'm saying that, what a family thing that is. God the Father, God the Son. We say it as the family of God. It's been passed down from generation to generation as a common confession of faith. Our voices joined together with those back from the 2nd century. We know that creed came from and will continue to be proclaimed. We're bound together in that way. Family is an interesting dynamic, isn't it? And there's an outline if you want to jot notes along. Of course, we'll have it up here in front of you on the screen too. But this story that we just heard is powerful. And I want to get into that story of Joseph and his brothers and their reunion and reconciliation and all of that. But as I told you in the beginning, I can think of 3 family reunions where we got together. We intentionally got together. And one time I was probably about 10, and we have all kinds of pictures from it. It was in St. Louis, and all the family lined up, all the cousins and nephews and nieces and grandkids are all lined up according by height, or age or whatever. And we have one of those pictures with all of that. And I have very specific memories about that, of it being humid and fireflies. Remember those in the Midwest? There used to be such a thing. And I have all those memories of that. And then we got together once in Phoenix when my mom and dad's with, there's 3 boys of us, and we were all adults at that time. And Mary's probably 30 years ago. And we had all those grandkids there, strong memories of that. And then we did one here in Idaho where we thought it was probably our last chance for my dad to have a chance to be with the family. And we went to Yellowstone and toured around all together. My dad passed away, so both Teresa and I were kind of orphans now. Both our parents on both sides have passed away. And when my dad passed, we were sitting at my dad and our home. And I said to my brothers are much older than me, 10 and 12 years older than me. And I said, you guys, what do you think the chances are that this may be the last time we get together? And I said, I'm not wanting that. I'm wanting the opposite. I'd like for us to find a way to be together. And one of my brothers said, why? That just really broke my heart in a number of ways. And it's not like I'm some great family guy and I'm this perfect model of familial stuff. But family kind of matters to me. I've got one nephew and one niece and me, and we are kind of the torchbearers of trying to get our family together. But my brothers are kind of like, why would we get together? We need a reason to get together. And I essentially said to them, why do you need a reason? Why don't we get together? Because we're family. So that we can catch up and we can pray for one another, we can encourage one another, we can tease and laugh and we can remember. Because family is a unique thing, isn't it? This is a design by God. Both levels of family. There's a significant piece here that I want to share with you. In the Old Testament, if you're a Bible student at all, if you pay attention to this in here, in the Old Testament, those bloodlines and genealogies and all those immediate family, all those relations that were born in tribes and things like that, it's a huge deal. All of those bloodlines and genealogies, that definition of family was a huge deal, and God set it up, put them together as tribes, wanted them to be a nation, his children, his people. I would be father to them, and so forth. And that would be a light to the world, a beacon to the world that would proclaim the glories and the faithfulness of a covenant God, a promise-making, promise-keeping God, and these would be his people. In fact, even today, that Old Testament model persists in Israel, right? You have to, for citizenship, you show your bloodline through your mother, and so that's how you were reckoned Jewish, and it's a big deal still. Now, isn't it interesting? So all through the Old Testament, if you follow that, it's you see it again and again and again. Who are you related to, and which tribe are you, and what's your hometown, and all of that. What's your legacy? You get to the New Testament, and isn't it interesting? Do you ever hear of Peter's kids? Or Paul's parents? Right? I mean, you look in the New Testament, and it seems as if the definition or the priority of that kind of bloodline family has changed. Now, I want to be careful with you here, because please understand, some people automatically assume if it changes or if it's different, it means what was before was bad. It's not what God means. Those bloodlines, God did, right? God built us in order to have children in the way that we do and have families. God holds that up. He describes himself as Father. Jesus describes us as the bride of Christ, and so forth. So those things still matter. But in addition to that, God allowed his family to be exponentially expanded. I mean, it's funny sometimes. One of the reasons we don't get together with family is because they're weird, right? You know, you're going, I wouldn't hang out with them if I had a choice. You know, or that's not somebody I would call up and say, let's go to a movie. If you have a family that's awesome, God bless you. I am being transparent and confessing about my screwed up, dysfunctional family. I am so thankful I married into my wife's side because they said they have blessed me. But my side is a mess. And it's not like it's a bunch of axe murderers and things like that. It's like we don't care. And that's just sad to me. And so, and Teresa and I have talked about this before because I've said, what did God do? And Jim and I were even talking about it this morning. God blessed me with you. And I mean that. I don't mean that in some kind of silly, facetious way. God blessed me with you. Because even now when you stand up and look around the room, you kind of go, would I choose to hang out with all these people? But we do. We do. And I love it. So anyway, there's a few things I want to share with you from this story because I think that family is such a powerful dynamic. And in this, we're kind of doing the summer theme, and family reunions often happen in the summer, right? We'll get together. And it can be everything from the highest of highs in your experience and fabulous just joy in family all the way down to, I'm never talking to you again. You know, I mean, it can be all of that, can't it? When you get together in family. And isn't it interesting that so often the family reunions and the times we get together as family are often in times of crisis, or they're very emotional, they're very, like it's a funeral. And then isn't it interesting, in my family, I found this to be the case. When my mom passed away, we had one of the biggest blowouts ever in our family. Because we get together, the family's all together at a time of crisis, and we're ill prepared to be able to deal with one another in a healthy way as family. We're ill prepared. We're gathered together because it's a crisis, or it's an emergency, or it's urgent, and we didn't plan for it. And here we are all thrown together in this emotional cauldron, and bad things can happen. Now, isn't this story with Joseph that too? Maybe, okay, so for some of you, many of you will know this. Don't be bored with me. Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, they actually do a really pretty good job of doing the history on it. In fact, yeah, Tim Rice even says in it, you know, he does that musical. He says it's all there in chapter 39 of Genesis, just so you know. It's right in the lyrics. But it starts at chapter 37 and goes all the way to chapter 50. So this story is a big deal in the book of Genesis. Okay, so Jacob has 12 sons, which essentially, we can argue details. Hang with me, Dinger paraphrase. Okay, 12 sons, essentially the 12 tribes of Israel. And one of the sons is Jacob's favorite. Ooh, that's a boo-boo, isn't it? That's a baddie. He's got a favorite. Gives him a special coat. It's Armani. It's especially lovely. And the other brothers are jealous. They are unhappy. But that's not the kicker. Joseph also has been given the ability to see and interpret dreams. And so he goes to his brothers and he says, hey, I had a dream, there's a bunch of stars, and then my star was in the middle and all your stars bowed down to me. And he says, oh, and then I had another dream, there's a bunch of sheaves of grain in the field, and my sheaf was in the middle and all your sheaves bowed down to me. I wonder what that could mean. You know, what an idiot. And so, and the brothers are hacked. And then not only that, the word gets back to dad, because even the father's sheaf bowed down to him. And the dad gets a little bit ticked because he says, are you saying I'm going to bow down to you? So as it develops, the jealousy enrages them in such a way that there comes a point where they plot and they said, let's kill him. I mean, this is a big deal. A dysfunctional family. The anger gets so much, so great. Let's kill him. One brother, so they throw him in a pit to try to figure out what to do, and they kind of say, let's kill him, let's say to dad that like a lion killed him. And the one brother, Reuben, is it Reuben or Judah? Reuben or Judah? Jim told me. Who is it, Jim? Reuben. Reuben says, nope, let's not kill him. Let's see if we can make a few bucks off of him. We'll sell him into slavery. So they sell him, and he ends up in slavery in Egypt. God is still with him, though. Blesses him. He becomes the leader of a rich Egyptian household. And then, even there, then things conspire against him because the wife of the house wants him to mess around with her. He says no. She accuses him of rape. He gets sent off to the dungeon. And there he is in the dungeon going, what in the world? God, are you still with me? And God is faithful. And he continues and he allows Joseph to be able to interpret a dream of Pharaoh's that he can't understand. No one can understand. And the dream is, you're going to have 7 great years and 7 famine years. You better store up in the 7 good years. And Pharaoh says, I'm putting you in charge. And so Joseph is in charge of that. And we discover that once the famine hits Canaan, this where Jacob and the kids live, they're about to die. And they come to Egypt begging for help. And here's Joseph with all his brothers kneeling before him. They don't recognize him, begging for help. Now, I don't know about you. Maybe your family is far more functional and healthy than mine was. I'm not sure how that would go in my family. If a hurt like that had happened, I'm not sure how that would have gone. I would like to think that we would forgive each other and that we would restore one another. I cannot guarantee that. And if your family would, that's awesome. And parents, isn't that what we want to build in our kids? I think if it was my kids, I'd be okay. If it was my brothers, I'm not 100% sure. And so this is a story, and think about it. In the Old Testament, what's the rule in the Old Testament? Eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, right? That's the deal. Quid pro quo. You did to me, I'll do it to you. So easily, he could have said, I'll throw you all in slavery. That's just fair, right? And we'll see if God will take care of you. But that's not the story we get. So what we get is forgiveness and restoration. Let's see what we can learn from it. 5 things I want to share with you from this. The first thing is this. I'm going to deal with the reality of this. Families encounter real hurts. I mean, we're here in church. We just got to be honest with one another. It would be nice to think, because sometimes in church, and honestly, I love being here on Sunday. There's no greater honor and privilege, I think Jim and I could both say this, than to share the promises of God with you, to eat at the meal together, to hear the forgiveness of sins, to worship together. It's just this great honor and privilege that we have to deliver the gifts of God to you. And sometimes, though, that can feel a little bit silted. We all hug each other as we go out, shake hands, and then we're in our car going home, and now I'm back to life. And so real hurts happen to even the most faithful of people. Sometimes we have said and we have done things. Jim made a great point. In families, more often than others, you get this. They hurt me. I ain't going to do nothing till they come to me first. He's dead on right, isn't he? And so that families encounter real hurts. Hurts that cut us to the core. And in Joseph's story, let's kill them. That's about as bad as it gets. And if they're not going to kill him, let's sell him into slavery. We'll get rid of him. And then on top of that, now let's lie to our aging father that his favorite son was killed. Let's lie to him about that. So you got the triple whammy. That's as bad as it gets. So families do encounter real hurts. Can they be overcome? And the second point in the outline is yes. Families can learn and change. You know what's interesting to me? Isn't it? I find this fascinating. Why is it? Teresa and I have every once in a while kind of reflected and thought about this. Why is it that families seem to be able to say cutting, hurting things more easily to one another than we would even to the checkout person at Fred Meyer? To strangers. Why is it that it seems that that's so easy for us? And we've debated it. Well, they have to still like us. They can't leave. They're stuck with us or whatever. You can choose your friends, right? And if a friend treated you like that, you'd probably ditch them. Or maybe not. We're Christian, right? We'd love them, wouldn't we? Perfectly. I'm joking now. It's hard. It's hard to overcome those things. And so, but with family, I'm stuck with you. So we say, isn't that sad though? It's a sadness to me that sometimes we can say things to the people we know and love the best, and they are very hurtful. And yet, what I find is reconciling from that can provide the kind of healing that is rich and deep and wide. That the healings that families experience, I have watched this, even in my own family, but I've watched it and been blessed with it in watching it in other families. When hurts that have been reconciled, the joy and the healing that happens in there after long years of hurt, the healing is wonderful. It is a healing which God intends. And so look at what happens here in the Joseph story. I'm giving you these right out of the Bible. And the first thing is we see the real hurts that happen, but the real healing. Judah steps up. See, here's what happens. Joseph throws him a fast one, and he wants to see if they've changed at all, right? He wants to see if his brothers have changed. They still don't know it's him. And he's like the prime minister of Egypt. So he says, here, take all this grain and take it back to your father. Help him out. Tells his guys, hide my royal cup in the bag of the youngest boy. And then, of course, then stop them, search for it, and when you find it, you arrest them all and bring them back to me. And they're horrified. They find the cup, they bring it back. We didn't steal it, we promised. And he says, there's the cup. What are you going to do? And he says, arrest them all, throw them in the dungeon. He says, here's the deal. I'm going to keep the youngest boy with me, Benjamin. You go back and tell them. And they are horrified. And so, who stands up here but Judah? And Judah says this, because these are words of reconciliation and change. Judah says, please, let your servant, let me remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come upon my father. What he's saying is, I saw it once. I will never forget it, and it will never happen again. Folks, I didn't say this at the first service. If you have an unresolved hurt in your family, please, Jesus spoke first to you. Before you ever repented, before you ever came to him, Jesus spoke and acted on the cross. For those we love and the families that we're in, please, go to them and say, let's make this right. Even if you have to say, and let me say it this way, even if you think you weren't in the wrong, you're in the wrong by not trying to heal it. And that's worth repenting of. Please forgive me. I mean, as I prepared this, I'm saying to myself, I got to call my brothers. And I need to repent to them and say, I'm finding myself more self-righteous than you, that I'm better, that I'm more gracious, that I'm thinking this in my head, of course. And now I'm reading this and I'm going, I'm a fool. I have to go to them and say, my Savior came to me first. I got to come. We got to make this right. And it's not as if we send hate letters to each other. We just don't do nothing. And that's almost worse. And so anyway, I encourage you, if you have that, a grudge, an unresolved hurt, because the healing that you can experience out of that deep hurt is God's healing, the healing that passes all understanding and restores us. Third thing, therefore, forgiveness is a family foundation. That's the third point. Forgiveness is a family foundation. It is so phenomenal that this sense of grace and mercy that Joseph shows is in the Old Testament here, in Genesis. Because as I said, so much of the Old Testament it's about justice, right? What's fair is fair. If you did it to me, I do it to you. It's just fair. And here we have this tremendous sense of grace. A man who was sold into slavery, lied about to his father that he was killed, and he says to his brothers, it's okay. Don't be distressed. And the reason he was able to say that, because if I say to you, well, just forgive the people that are hurt, that doesn't do you any good for me to say that to you. Just forgive those people who have hurt you. Here's why. Because you have been forgiven. Have you not? You too have been forgiven. And we who have been forgiven, that's what happens with Joseph. He was sustained, restored. God was faithful. God preserved him. God gave him the opportunity to bless others and to rise once again. And he saw God's faithfulness. If we have seen and experienced God's faithfulness, what a privilege it is to be able to then step out and make forgiveness the foundation of our family. That forgiveness and grace, which we have received, provides healing balm to others. I love this. And you know, in the chapter 50, it's great, isn't it? So Jacob dies, and the rest of the brothers, you can just see them. They're getting together over a beer, and they go, I bet he's going to throw us in jail. I bet the only thing that kept him nice was that Dad was still alive. And so it sounds like they make up this thing. Dad said, here, let's read you a statement that Dad wrote. I'm guessing Jacob never wrote it. I'm guessing that they come to him and say, here, this is what Dad said you should do. And Joseph, this is just such an example in Genesis of grace. We have beautiful examples of grace. And Joseph stops and he says, don't be distressed. Why are you so distressed? Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. And so Joseph gets the why. Forgiveness is a family foundation. It's a foundation upon which the health of our family can be built. It leads me to number 4. Now, 4 and 5 are the 2 points that I hope you'll walk away with too. So I was blessed to do a wedding yesterday. Emily Marquette and Jose Guevara. And so Emily and Joey got married yesterday. I'm very proud of them both. It's really cool. And when I meet with them for pre-marriage counseling, my soapbox, and I've said this to you before, and because I want to repeat it to you, I say, my goal is that you have a plan for your marriage. I want you to have a plan. What's the plan for making your marriage great? For growing in your knowledge of the Lord, for parenting your kids, for growing in your own intimacy and your understanding of each other? What's your plan? And we use scripture and we use all kinds of different tools to try to help that happen. My question to you would be, let's broaden that out. Have you ever thought of asking this question at a family gathering, sitting down with your family at a table and saying, what do you think God's plan is for our family? Does that sound weird? I hope it doesn't. I hope it sounds like, man, that's something we probably should have been doing forever. Does God have a plan for our family? Is there something that he wants to see done because he has created us as this family? And then, because we ask it here in this family all the time, don't we, here at church, is there something God is wanting us to do as his church family? But how about at home? I'm going to challenge you to do that. I think what a blessing that is. It's not a law thing. I don't want it to be a burden. What a blessing. What if through your time of prayer and reflection, God revealed things that he is longing for you as a family to do? That would be my desire here, because that's the example that we have from Joseph. He says this, number 4. The question is, what's God wanting to do in and through our family? Look at what Joseph says. God sent me ahead of you, here to Egypt, to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Boy, that would drive me. That was what was driving Joseph. As he saw them, he says, now I know why. Now I know why this happened to me. This wasn't just about me making it through and overcoming tremendous odds. God had a plan for me and now for our family. And what we learn is, they didn't realize at that point, but this is how God sends a Messiah. This is how God keeps his family and his promises intact and fulfilled, because it is through this family that we get Jesus Christ. God is preserving his promises and keeping faithful to his commitments to you and to me. And then the last thing is this. We were blessed last week beyond measure. We were surprised. The church gave us gifts and cards and thoughts and well wishes, emails through the week, because we've been here 10 years. I've been here 10 years. And it was just really delightful, and I'm very, very grateful for all of you doing that. And so it took us like into the evening last Sunday to go through all these cards and read all these thoughts and your thoughts. And I cannot tell you how grateful. Every one of them was powerful and meaningful. Some of them, I have to say, stood out in this way. I had no idea. There were at least a dozen cards where people said, God used you to do this in my life. You know, we count it a tremendous honor to stand up here and be your pastor. I know that Jim and I count it just among the greatest honors that we could have to be able to share the gifts and grace of God with you. We are longing for a legacy, not for ourselves. A legacy of God. And isn't that what you want as your family too? A legacy. And that's the 5th point here. God uses families to bear witness to others. This family, but your own family also. Because at the very end, when Joseph's brothers come to him and he said, Dad left a note and said, don't kill us. And Joseph kind of goes, why are you so worried? Haven't I proven myself? And what he says is, you intended to harm me, one of the great verses of all of the Old Testament. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. A legacy. A legacy. So when I read those notes, your kind words, it just is so humbling to say, I never knew. I didn't realize, and I am so grateful and so humbled and so thankful that we had the opportunity to do that. Now, here's my point, because I want to leave you with some real strong grace. Joseph is saying that in the last chapter of Genesis. But I believe in his mouth are the words of Jesus Christ. Because Jesus would say exactly the same thing. As he hangs on the cross, as he is paying for sin and has become sin for you and for me, he is saying, you meant to harm me. But God meant it for good, for the saving of many lives. And that, my friends, is the legacy of all our family. Praise be to God.